Darren had been jobless for months. He lived in a small room in the back of an old building, sharing space with noisy neighbors and a leaking roof. He had applied for many jobs but never got a reply. His savings were almost finished, and he was starting to lose hope. One day, while scrolling through job ads on an old tablet, he saw a strange post. It simply said, "Housekeeper needed, high pay, discretion required, location, Earth, Sector 9. There was no company name, no detailed description, just those few words. Darren didn't think much of it, but decided to send an application. After all, he had nothing to lose. To his surprise, he got a reply within minutes. A voice message played on his device. It didn't sound human. The voice was calm, clear, and slightly metallic. "You are accepted. Arrival instructions are being sent. Report at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Dress simply, no weapons." That last part made him nervous. He looked at the message again, wondering if it was real. But the next morning, a small, self-driving pod was waiting outside his building. He stepped in, and the door closed behind him. The pod moved smoothly, faster than any car he had ever been in. It didn't take long before the scenery outside changed. The dirty streets and noisy shops of his neighborhood faded into clean roads and tall, shining buildings. Then, the pod turned into a private road that led to a large, beautiful house hidden behind tall trees. It didn't look like any house Darren had ever seen. Parts of it floated. Some walls were made of glowing blue glass. It looked both peaceful and strange. The pod stopped, and the door opened. Darren stepped out and looked around nervously. Before he could knock or say anything, the door of the house opened on its own. A tall woman stood in the doorway. She was clearly not human. Her skin had a silver tone, and her eyes glowed softly like stars. Her hair floated lightly around her head as if moved by air that wasn't there. She wore a long, simple robe and looked calm, but distant. "You are Darren?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, unsure of what else to say. "I am Zira," she said. "Come in. You will begin now." The inside of the house was even stranger than the outside. The furniture floated slightly above the floor. Small, round robots moved silently across the room, picking up dust or adjusting lights. The air smelled fresh, like a garden after rain. Darren didn't know where to look. Everything was clean, quiet, and almost too perfect. There were no photos, no clutter, and no personal items. It felt more like a museum than a home. Zira walked ahead of him, speaking slowly. "Your duties are basic: dusting, organizing, removing, waste, and maintaining calm. You will not enter the red chamber, the lower lab, or my personal rest area. You will be paid weekly. If you speak to outsiders about this place, you will be removed." Darren nodded quickly. Understood. Zira gave him a small device that looked like a flat stone. "Use this to open rooms and call for help if needed." Then she disappeared into another room, and the door shut behind her without a sound. Darren stood alone in the hallway. He looked around. The place was already spotless. The robots seemed to be doing most of the work. He wondered what was left for him to do. He walked into one of the rooms and found a bookshelf full of small, glowing boxes instead of books. Another room had floating chairs and a table that changed color every few seconds. In the kitchen, machines prepared food without any help. It became clear to him that the house didn't really need cleaning. Instead of working, Darren found himself wandering through the rooms. He touched nothing but observed everything. He talked to the robots, but they didn't respond. He opened doors and looked into strange rooms filled with lights and sounds he didn't understand. Everything was beautiful, but lifeless. Later that evening, Zira found him sitting near the garden room. A large window showed the sky, and the stars were beginning to appear. "You haven't cleaned anything," she said calmly. Darren stood up, quickly, I didn't know where to start. Everything already looks perfect. Zira looked at him for a moment. Perhaps? There was silence between them. Why did you hire me? Darren finally asked. She didn't answer at first. Then she said, even perfection can feel empty. Darren didn't know what she meant, but the way she said it made him feel something. From that day, he started talking to her whenever he could. He'd wait near the kitchen when she passed by. He'd ask questions about her planet, about why she came to Earth, and about what she missed. At first, Zira gave short answers, but slowly her replies became longer. She told him about Cytherian, her home planet. She told him about floating cities, music made of light, and gardens that sang in the wind. He listened with full attention. He told her about Earth, too. Not the good parts, but the real ones. The noise, the dirt, the loneliness in crowded cities. They were from different worlds, but both felt alone. Zira never told him to leave. She never reminded him to clean. And Darren, for the first time in a long time, felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Darren woke up early the next morning. He had slept in a soft, white room Zira had given him. The bed was warm and adjusted to his body like it was reading his thoughts. The ceiling changed colors as the sun rose, and soft music played as if the house itself knew he was awake. It didn't feel like Earth. It didn't even feel like a dream. It felt like he was living inside a peaceful machine. He washed his face using a sink that didn't need water, just a soft mist that cleaned his skin. He put on the same clothes from yesterday, not knowing if there was a dress code here. When he stepped into the hallway, the same little robots floated past him, doing their silent tasks. He found Zira in the garden room. She stood silently, looking up at the sky through the giant glass window. The stars were still visible, slowly fading as morning arrived. "Good morning," Darren said, trying to sound polite. Zira nodded but said nothing. Her face was calm, almost expressionless. Darren thought about walking away, but instead he stayed. "This place is amazing," he said. "I've never seen anything like it. The air smells like fresh lemons." Zira turned to him. "The air is filtered through living vines from my home world. They adjust the scent based on the mood of the house." Darren blinked. "The house has moods?" "It reflects mine," she answered simply. He didn't know what to say to that, so he smiled awkwardly and said, "Well, I guess it's a good sign it smells nice today." To his surprise, Zira's lips curved just a little, almost like a smile. As the day passed, Darren tried to clean. He picked up a cloth and wiped down some surfaces, but they were already spotless. The robots would quickly fix anything he touched, correcting his work. He tried helping in the kitchen, but the machines didn't need him. In fact, one even gently pushed him aside. After an hour, Darren gave up. Instead, he walked through the house again, trying to learn its design. He discovered a music room with no instruments, just walls that responded to hand movements, playing soft tones when he waved. In another room, there were glass tanks filled with colorful lights swimming like fish. Everything was strange, beautiful, and full of wonder. But it all felt too quiet, too empty. He started talking to the house. He told jokes. He spoke about his childhood, the food he missed, the family members he hadn't seen in years. He didn't know if the house could understand, but it felt better than being silent. Later in the day, he saw Zira again. She was sitting in a round chair that floated a few inches off the floor, reading from a transparent screen. "Do you get bored here?" Darren asked her. She looked up. "No," he paused. "Do you ever leave the house?" "Rarely." "Do you have friends on Earth?" "No." Her answers were short, but she didn't seem angry, just distant. "Why did you come here?" Darren asked. Zira looked at him for a long moment. "To escape." Darren sat down on the floor across from her. "From what?" There was a long silence. Then she said, "From people who saw me as a tool, not a person. Darren nodded slowly. He didn't know exactly what she meant, but he felt the weight behind her words. He didn't push further. "I've felt that way before," he said. "Like I was just a number. Like I didn't matter to anyone." Zira tilted her head slightly. "You understand loneliness?" He nodded. "Very well." Zira's eyes softened a bit. "On Cytherian, we value silence. Emotions are private. We are taught not to express too much. But silence has become heavy here." Darren looked around the house. "It's beautiful, but it's also quiet. Too quiet. Maybe what this house needs isn't cleaning." Zira raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" Laughter. Noise. "Something real," he said. That evening, Darren brought a small speaker from his old bag. It was cracked and old, but it still worked. He played earth music, soft jazz, then old rock, then even silly songs from children's shows. The house seemed confused at first. The walls flickered lightly, reacting to the sound. Zira walked into the room, watching him dance around to the music. "This is part of your cleaning?" she asked, amused. "Yes," Darren replied with a grin. "Emotional cleaning." She stood still for a moment, then walked over and sat down. She didn't dance, but she stayed. She listened. The next day, Darren began sharing Earth snacks with her. He offered her popcorn, but she didn't like the texture. She enjoyed chocolate, though, and even asked for more. He taught her Earth expressions like, "chill out," "take it easy," and "this house is wild," which made her raise an eyebrow every time. Every day he noticed Zira speaking more. She asked small questions. She listened when he spoke. Sometimes she even replied with small jokes, dry, clever ones that made him laugh harder than expected. And though he wasn't doing much actual cleaning, Zira didn't stop him. She never asked him to leave. In fact, one evening she said quietly, "The house feels different." Darren smiled. Better? Lighter? That one word made him feel proud. He hadn't dusted a thing. But maybe, just maybe, he was helping in a different way. Days passed, and Darren's routine in Zira's home became familiar. He still didn't do much cleaning, and the robots took care of most chores anyway. But something else had started to grow, a silent connection between the two. They spoke more now, mostly during meals or while walking through the glowing garden hall. Darren never forced conversations. He just talked like he would with a friend, and slowly, Zira began to open up. One evening, Darren noticed Zira sitting alone near the Starlight Dome, a room with a clear ceiling that showed the stars. Her face looked thoughtful, her usual calm expression replaced by something more serious. He hesitated at first, but then walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked softly. She nodded without looking at him. The stars reflected in her silver-toned eyes, making her look even more distant, like she belonged to the sky and not the earth. "I've always loved stars," Darren said. "Back home, my mom used to say that every star is a memory someone left behind." Zira glanced at him. "That is a lovely idea." "You seem somewhere far tonight," he said. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice quieter than usual, she said, "On my planet, I was part of the high-knowledge circle. We were creators, builders, thinkers. I was honored." Darren nodded slowly. He had guessed Zira was someone important. "But over time," she continued, "others became afraid of the changes I wanted. They believed I thought too differently, felt too much. They didn't say it out loud, but I could see it. I was not like them anymore." She paused, her eyes still on the stars. "I created something once, something beautiful. A machine that could feel joy. It sang when it learned. It danced in light. But the council said it was dangerous. They destroyed it. They said I was becoming unstable. that emotions were not for machines or for scientists. "That's awful," Darren said, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness. "I left before they could take more from me. I traveled here to Earth. This house is mine. It listens only to me, but it is empty, because I do not trust anyone." She looked at him now. Her voice had not changed much, but her eyes held something new. Pain. Buried deep, but still alive. "Until you came," she added. Darren didn't know what to say at first. He had never heard anything like this. A woman from another world, a genius who had created living machines, pushed away because she felt too much. He leaned back, looking at the stars. "I know I'm not smart like you," he said slowly. "I've been fired from jobs, made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, but I do know what it feels like when people see you as a problem just for being different." Zira watched him. "I used to work at a factory," Darren continued. "I fixed machines. But I liked talking too much, asking questions. My boss hated that. One day he told me, 'You're not a machine, but I wish you were. Machines don't talk back.' I lost that job. After that, I stopped asking questions." Zira tilted her head slightly. "You should not have stopped." "Maybe not," Darren replied, smiling a little. "But maybe that's why I feel so comfortable here. You don't want a perfect machine. You just want someone real." The silence between them felt warm now, not heavy. Later that week, Zira fell ill. It happened quickly. She was in the garden when she suddenly collapsed. Darren rushed to her side, calling out her name. The small robot assistants floated nearby, but did not move to help. "Why aren't you doing anything?" Darren shouted at them, panicking. "The system does not recognize illness," Zira whispered weakly. "I never taught it." Darren lifted her gently. She was lighter than he expected. He carried her to the rest area, placing her on a cushioned bed. She gave him instructions between shallow breaths. Open the silver drawer, pour 2 drops of blue liquid into a glass of warm water, adjust the room's temperature with the control pad. He followed everything exactly. For 2 days, he stayed by her side. He brought her water, fed her soft food from Earth when she couldn't eat her own alien meals, and spoke to her even when she didn't answer. "You know," he said once while wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, "this is the first time I've really felt needed here." Zira opened her eyes just a little. "You are needed." He smiled. After the 3rd day, she began to recover. Her color returned and her voice grew stronger. Darren was still by her side, reading random things from his old notebook. Song. Lyrics, funny stories, notes he'd written years ago. "Why are you still here?" she asked him gently. "I don't leave sick friends alone," he answered simply. She looked at him for a long time. When she could finally walk again, she stood near the garden window, staring out. "You could have left," she said. "You could have taken money or stolen from the lab. I would not have stopped you. But I'm not here for that," Darren said. "I'm here for you." Zira turned to him, and for the first time since he arrived, she smiled, fully, softly, and clearly. That smile said more than any machine, more than any star or glowing wall. It said she wasn't alone anymore, and maybe neither was he. After Zira recovered, the house felt different. It wasn't just the quiet rooms or the glowing walls. It was the air, the energy. Darren noticed it immediately. There was warmth now, not just in the temperature, but in the way Zira spoke to him, the way she paused when he talked, and how she sometimes waited for him before meals, something she never did before. Darren began waking up earlier than usual. He no longer wandered the house with nothing to do. Instead, he had an idea. One morning, he stood in the center of the living space and looked around at the perfect, quiet home. It was still spotless, but it didn't feel alive. "I think it's time I really clean this place," he said aloud. The robots floated by as usual, ignoring him. But Darren didn't mean dust or dirt. He meant something else. He started with a room that seemed untouched, a storage room filled with old boxes, closed panels, and holographic screens that hadn't been turned on in a long time. He opened one box and found small silver tools and smooth crystals that hummed softly. Another box held rolled-up plans, machine designs, notes in a language he couldn't understand, and a picture of a round glowing machine. It had gentle eyes and what looked like musical pipes across its body. "This must have been her creation," Darren whispered. He didn't touch it too much. He didn't want to break anything, but he carefully stacked everything in a clean corner, gently placing the picture on top. In another room, he found something different. Awards. Tall, thin, glowing shapes with her name in alien letters. One of them looked cracked, pushed into a box with broken parts. He took it out, cleaned it, and placed it on a shelf in the main hall. Slowly, one by one, he brought out her past. Not the painful parts, but the parts that reminded her who she truly was. A builder, a creator, a leader. Each day he arranged something new. He didn't ask for her permission. He simply believed it was the right thing to do. He wasn't invading her privacy. He was returning her to herself. Zira noticed. The first time she saw her old invention plans laid out neatly, she froze at the door. Darren watched her silently. She walked in slowly, touched the edge of a paper, and closed her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because I think you've hidden these long enough," Darren replied. "This house isn't just yours, it's your story. Why hide the good parts?" She didn't answer, but she didn't stop him either. He continued working through the week. He found her music collection, not Earth music, but strange sound spheres that glowed when touched. He placed them in the main room and made a shelf just for them. When she walked by, he played one. The soft sounds filled the air, not like instruments, but like singing winds and glowing water. It was beautiful. One afternoon, while cleaning the control panels near the red chamber, he stopped and looked at the closed door. Zira had told him never to go in there. He didn't, but he sat outside it for a while. "I don't need to go in," he said softly. "But one day, if you want to talk about it, I'll listen." Then he stood up and walked away. The biggest change came when he walked into Zira's meditation room. It was empty, just a soft floor and a single chair. But something about it felt sad, untouched, unused. He took a small table from the corner, placed one of her old awards on it, and added a glowing flower from the garden. Then he placed her old invention photo beside it. It looked like a memory corner, a place to remind her she was more than the past. That evening, Zira walked into the room and didn't come out for a long time. Later, she found Darren in the kitchen, trying to prepare tea the Earth way. He had boiled water and dropped leaves into a small cup. It wasn't fancy, but he offered it to her with a smile. She took the cup and looked at him. "You did more cleaning this week than the robots have done in years," she said quietly. Darren laughed. "I didn't even lift a broom." She smiled, too. A soft, real smile. "You removed the dust from places no machine could reach," she added. He looked at her, unsure if she meant the house or something deeper. But she didn't explain, and he didn't need her to. The next morning, Zira gave him access to a new panel in the house. It allowed him to control lighting, music, temperature, things only she had handled before. It was a sign of trust, and Darren didn't take it lightly. He began setting up small dinners, one Earth dish, one Cytherian snack. They weren't perfect, and sometimes the food clashed in flavor, but they laughed about it, and it became a new tradition. One day, as they sat under the starlight dome, Zira turned to him and said, "I once thought silence was peace, but maybe peace is sharing space with someone who understands." Darren looked at her and said, Maybe peace is just being able to be yourself without fear. They sat together in silence, not the heavy, cold silence from before, but a warm, gentle one. Like the house itself was breathing again. Darren hadn't just cleaned the house. He had cleared the shadows. He had returned light where it had been hidden, and in doing so, he had found something he didn't even know he needed, a place that felt like home. After weeks spent together, Zira and Darren's lives slowly changed. The house, once quiet and lonely, now felt alive with small moments of laughter, conversation, and shared silence that was comfortable, not cold. Darren still didn't clean, much in the usual way, but the home felt better cared for than ever. And Zira, once distant and closed off, began to trust more, not just the housekeeper she had hired, but the human beside her. One morning, as dawn light poured softly through the glowing windows, Zira came to Darren's room. She was holding a small, delicate object, a tiny glowing crystal shaped like a star. "This is from my planet," she said quietly. "It is called a lumina. It holds light, warmth, and memory. I want you to have it." Darren was surprised. "Why me?" "Because you helped me find light when I was lost. You helped me trust again." He took the crystal carefully, feeling a warmth spread through his hands. It was unlike anything he had ever touched. For a moment, they just looked at each other, sharing a silent understanding that needed no words. From then on, the two became more than just employer and housekeeper. They shared meals, stories, and even dreams. Darren began helping Zira build connections outside the house. She had stayed hidden for so long, afraid of what others might think or do. But with Darren's encouragement, she started contacting other aliens on Earth, sharing her knowledge and opening herself up slowly. One day, Darren helped organize a small meeting in the house. Visitors from both Earth and Cytherian came, curious and eager to learn. Zira spoke about her inventions and the beauty of her home world. Darren guided the guests, translating between languages and cultures. It was a joyful event, a celebration of differences and friendship, but the most important change was in the house itself. It no longer felt like a place to hide, but a home to live in. The glowing plants in the garden grew brighter. The room echoed with laughter. Even the robots seemed more active, as if they too felt the shift. Darren and Zira grew close, learning from each other every day. Zira taught Darren about science, the stars, and the art of creating machines that could think and feel. Darren shared stories of Earth's simple pleasures: rain, the taste of fresh fruit, and the feeling of a warm fire. One evening, as they sat under the star-lit dome, Zira reached for Darren's hand. It was the first time she had done something so personal. "You have changed my world," she whispered. "Not just this house, but my heart." Darren smiled. "And you have changed mine." They didn't need to say more. The silence between them was full of promises, of friendship, trust, and maybe something deeper. Time passed. Darren no longer thought of himself as just a housekeeper. He was a companion, a friend, and someone who had helped bring a lonely alien woman back to life in a way no machine ever could. The housekeeper who didn't clean had done much more. He had cleaned away fear, loneliness, and doubt. Together they created a new home, one filled with light, warmth, and hope. And that was the greatest cleaning of all.